I think that's some cards this morning. I don't know if I'll be getting through there.
I was watching after eye surgery. They're not yet, right yet, and seeing, I can't, yeah, so I'm watching everything. It's a heaven to look and see. So there. I understand this. Yeah, I've watched it. I'll let you know what it is. I've never, some people tell me first years we get like yeah. Not hard. I started working. I mean, yeah. What I like really studio. I love it. Yeah, that sounds very academic. I know. That way. A lot of women's styles. When did they pay for it? If you are, I can also consider mainly. So it makes it. Oh, that one.
Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get ourselves started so we have enough time. Welcome to our second week for the online people. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Our second week of speaking of faith. On your left, on your right. Yeah, on your right. It's not my screen. Marjorie Burris. Marjorie is an elder in this church. You're not on session right now, are you? Okay, that's right. Margie grew up in Charlotte, has always lived in North Carolina, most of her life in Davidson. She is a graduate of Queens, now University, and the Carolina School of Medical Technology. Before she and Lynn had their daughters, she worked as a medical tech, which I did not know that either. Anybody know that? Well, one person. All right, one person knew that. She is what we call a cradle Presbyterian. Grew up, born in as Presbyterians. On my left, on your left, there you go. Her daughter, Joanna Burris Williford, she was also born in Charlotte and raised in Davidson, a graduate of Elon University. Yep. And she calls herself a professional mom, which I kind of like. Yeah. But she also does freelance as an independent contractor, specializing in data research and management for the American City Business Journals in Charlotte. Welcome. We are glad you are here, and we will get started.
Good morning. Glad to be here. I'm Joanna Burris Williford. I'm also known as Marjorie and Lynn's daughter. I grew up here in Davidson and grew up in Davidson College Presbyterian Church. John, thank you for inviting us to do this morning. I'm thrilled, and I'm especially happy to be here doing this in the summer because I brought some things with me to show you what growing up at DCPC was like in the summer. So first of all, if you have $1 or $2, you could come have breakfast at DCPC in the summer. Mr. McCready, you remember this because you spent many summers getting breakfast ready. This was back in.
You bought the food.
Yes, you sure did. This was back in, I'm going to say it was the 1980s, early 90s. I know it's hard to believe I'm that old, but it's true. And if you had $2 or less, you could get a biscuit. You could get some coffee cake, some orange juice, or coffee. It was the way that the church kind of kept things going in the summer. A lot of times, after the college students left, there wasn't a lot going on, and the church started to get people wanting to come in the summer, be involved, and that was one of the ways they did it. I have a lot of fond memories of that, and of you, both of you being here, and Mom and Dad did it. I know the Mannings did it. It was a lot of fun. The second thing you need for your Sundays at DCPC is you need a fan. Yes. I can probably fold a piece of paper or a bulletin, in about 10 different ways to get maximum airflow. There was no air conditioning whatsoever. And so you had, and they didn't even have like the pretty fans. Remember how they had the fans with the stick? They didn't have those back when I was growing up in the church. So you just had to fold a bulletin or something to keep yourself cool. And the third thing, and many of you will recognize this, is my softball t-shirt, Charlie's Angels. Back when Charlie Renow was the minister here, and we called ourselves Charlie's Angels. And you had to rep the church, of course, DCPC on the back. I wouldn't say I was a great softball player, but my dad was the coach. So if there weren't enough people to come, oftentimes it was me. Back in those days, you had to have 3 women to play. And sometimes I was considered the third woman. I don't,
Talk.
Ruth Coffee, remember her? She was a baller. She could hit that ball. She played catcher. She played second base. She was awesome.
She hit a home run.
She hit a home run in the park home run one time. So those are some of my super fond memories of growing up here at DCPC and summertime. So we are thrilled to be here talking about our faith journeys. I'm gonna, as you can probably tell, keep it real light, and Mom's gonna take over now and talk a little bit about her faith journey.
Well, I want to tell a little bit about my background because it's so shaped. Thank you, John. I hope people will hear me. It's so shaped my faith journey. I know some of you maybe, excuse my glasses, I've had eye surgery, so I'm having problems with focusing till I get my new glasses and my eyes in shape. These classes that the new members have, over the years, we have developed a way that the membership class will talk about their faith journey. Lynn's back there shaking her head because she's part of that committee. And some of you that have joined more recently know that we do talk about faith journey. And the members of the committee give their faith journey. Well, one of the people that laughs at this so much is Stephanie Malachevsky, because she has heard Lynn tell so many times about his faith journey. He says he had Presbyterian parents. He was born on a Sunday morning at Presbyterian Hospital. And that he first went to church when he was just several weeks old. So he was a true Presbyterian. But a lot of times what we hear in the classes are people coming from two different denominations, or maybe one has grown up in one denomination and hasn't been part of that for years and years. So we see a lot of blending of families. And the Presbyterian Church is really wonderful about reaching out and the acceptance that they give. My parents were from Middle Tennessee and moved to the Charlotte area as young marrieds, and had no family. We never had any family around, did we? We had all of us, but we didn't have. I have a brother and my parents, and that's it. So the church was very important to them in the community where we moved, because it was the center of everything. All the activities that took place, civic activities, cultural activities, as well as the church activities, seemed to circulate around this church. My mom had grown up as Presbyterian. She's the only Presbyterian in our crowd. My dad had been Lutheran, and I know we've got several Lutheran people here from their backgrounds. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about Judy. But they had trouble finding a church when he was growing up, because they moved to, his family moved to Middle Tennessee, and there weren't a lot of Lutherans around in that area. And they eventually ended up in a place called Christiana, which is a Swedish community. And then other Swedes started moving in, and so they had more or less house churches. They would meet with each other at church. That was their background, my dad's background. Lynn's family background was also Lutheran. His, we've got our Catawba County representatives here. His folks grew up in Catawba County, and it's very Lutheran there, lots of Lutheran churches. His mother was Baptist. Well, then they moved to Charlotte, and there weren't many Lutheran churches around in their area. And so they ended up in more or less the church community that served a lot of people where they lived. And they, it was very much like my church. It was like the center of the community where all the activities took place, and where you saw a lot of your friends from school or went to Bible school with them and that type of thing. So they were a blended family, just like some of these that I've talked to you about that we see in the new member class. And you know, this is a very Presbyterian area we've moved into. Any of you that have come here, you realize we've got a lot of more churches now than we used to have in different denominations, but originally there were what was called the Seven Sister Churches, which were formed by the Scotch Irish that moved to this, immigrated to this area, and they were not very fond of the British by any means. There were a few Church of England, but those were spread far and wide. And they had come primarily from Ireland, although they were not Irish. They had been displaced from Scotland to Ireland. And that was another reason they didn't care much for the British moving them there. So we live in a very Presbyterian area. I think other than the Pittsburgh area, I think we have, is that right, John? If you heard that, we have more Presbyterians, the Presbyterian churches. Are set up in this area. Well, my church in Charlotte was Mulberry, and my parents moved to that area because it was convenient. My dad traveled and that he could get to the airport well. He could get downtown to get he had a special PO box where we went regularly because he did his mail a day earlier there. And this church really shaped me. I was baptized and confirmed there. Our minister that was in charge of that was an in-law and someone that I grew to really enjoy. He took over from the minister that had been ill for a while. And so several classes of confirmants were together, several different ages. And it was a wonderful class. And he used John 3, the story of Nicodemus and being born again and receiving the Holy Spirit. And as it said in one of the guides that I looked in, John 3:16 is considered the gospel in a nutshell. Many have memorized it, maybe more than any other verse in the Bible. It's the story of salvation, how God loved the world, his gift of his son, and anyone that believes can be saved, all in one verse. So that was the basis of a lot of our study.
You see that a lot today too. You see like bumper stickers and or like, you know, car plaques now. Yeah.
At all games.
Yeah.
Joe,
really
so big. This is the baseball family
Yeah.
over here.
But yeah, you see that a lot today. That's interesting that it calls it in a nutshell. That's the perfect way to describe it.
Well, I don't know how many of you grew up in churches that gave out little leaflets to you in Sunday school. Well, my minister as a youngster really believed in this. It was, John, I don't know if you've seen these, they were wonderful leaflets that had oftentimes on the front a picture that was maybe an old master painting, or others that showed children in the time frame we were in. You opened it up and it was inside about a story that you would be studying that day in your Sunday school class. And on the back of the leaflet, oftentimes it's a song or prayer or an activity. And I love these. We got them on Sunday, we came home, we played with them, we read them again, we enjoyed them. That was one of my fondest memories, as well as sitting in a little round table with the teacher almost in the middle. It's sort of a semicircle table. I don't know if any of you have ever seen those. And I can still see Miss Gary Todd sitting there teaching us Bible verses and songs. And you've heard me talk about my song, Praise Him, that I learned there, that it has stuck with me through the years. And we also had camp and Bible school and retreats and so forth. So it really was a very meaningful experience. My first visit to Davidson College occurred when I was in the youth group and we had a youth conference here. And I was so excited because I got to stay in Belleville.
How old were you? Like what grade were you in?
Oh, it's maybe 13 or 14.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, I thought that was just marvelous, you know, I was big experience going to college campus. I don't know if any of you had attendance pins. We had attendance pins.
Marjorie, I have mine down in my office.
I should have brought mine.
I know, I mean, I brought props, you gotta bring your
And bring my thing. We're gonna talk about the shame that he felt when he said he'd been in Sundays at church and he hadn't. Y'all remember that distinctly, because yeah. Next bar, because I had to miss. And the catechism, I don't know how many of you recited the catechism. Regular, the children's, and I never did the shorter catechism. I don't know about you. I learned the shorter. You, well, good for you. I didn't get that far. I also remember at that time in this church, very distinctly, I remember the music. And the music was the music of the times. And my parents, I wrote down some of their favorites, like Blessed Assurance, Jesus is Mine. That was my dad loved that one. As well as How Great Thou Art, which was Swedish. I don't know if you know this, that's a Swedish folk song. And he loved it because his parents were Swedish. And his mother remembered, as a youngster growing up, playing the guitar with her brother who played the banjo. And they would go around to their various friends singing folk songs, and that was one of them. I also loved Very Short Jesus, which I don't hear much anymore. I had John Kirkendall to play that for us when we had the favorite hymns in the summer. Y'all remember doing that when we had our hymn sings? What a Friend We Have in Jesus. I think that was one of Mom's favorites. And How Firm a Foundation. And Lynn would get it if I didn't mention his. I hope it's built on nothing less. That's the Burris hymn. And we had to have that in his service because it had been at all of his brothers and his dad's service.
Beautiful.
And they loved that. A Mighty Fortress. These were just memories of mine that I treasure because I do enjoy a lot the church music, and those things mean a lot to me to have those continue and still sing them from time to time. And my minister loved Holy, Holy, Holy. He loved that song. He played that, had that played so often. And here a few weeks ago, before David took his sabbatical, we had Trinity Sunday. And I had already turned in, because David said, if any of you have favorite hymns you would like to suggest. Well, I suggested that. So David, he made an arrangement, and y'all remember that, the choir did. And we also sang it that Sunday as a congregation. And I thought, Reverend Greer would be so happy to have that.
He's so proud of you.
I suggested that.
Those things you sing growing up and do growing up, really, they never leave you. Growing up in DCPC, many of you know Miss Kane. She was my music teacher here, and she taught us to sing the books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Yes, I can still sing the entire Bible. It's a song she taught us once, many Sundays and during the week when we would come for choir practice, which I wasn't really great at choir, but she encouraged me and I learned about my books of the Bible. But those are things that you always take with you.
Yeah. They say those things you learn as a child do stick with you. They mean a lot to you. Well, I've talked a lot about our church, but one thing I do want to say, it was a different time. And I was very proud of my church when Charlotte and the rest of the country were having a lot of desegregation problems. And at that same time, churches were forming that sort of resisted that somewhat, as well as women being in the church, being active in the church, being ministers, being officers and elders and so forth. And they had not a split, but they had this dispute going on in the church. And my dad was an elder at the time, and in fact helped to lead the congregational meeting when they talked about this. And the church decided that they were staying with the Presbyterian church. They were not going to break away. They didn't feel like that was the right path to take. And some did leave and helped to form a PCA church, which was more very conservative. Did not have women as leaders, as I understand it, in the pulpit or as officers. And the desegregation issue went on and on for a while, in the schools particularly. But I was very proud that the church decided to stay the course that they had been on. As John said, I moved out of Queens, and I'll just briefly say a little bit about that. I'm afraid I'm running too long here. I really enjoyed the couple of religion classes that I got to take in Queens. I finished in 3 years because I didn't want to go on to the med tech program. And so I didn't get to take a lot of electives. I just didn't have the time to do that. But I did have one religion professor that I liked so much. His name was Curry, Dr. Curry, which is a very Presbyterian name that you hear a lot. And he wanted us to realize that we needed to look beyond the boundaries of the campus, and that we needed to, and of course, like I said before, the segregation issue had been going on, and he wanted us to realize that we had some responsibility to inform ourselves and to realize the ramifications beyond our campus. He's one of the shining lights, I think, that meant a lot to a lot of the women there. Queens was known for a lot of girls going across the street to church. It was Myers-Park Baptist Church, because it was right across the street from the campus. You didn't have to go very far. But it was a very progressive church, and the minister was Dr. Heaton, and many of you ever remember Dr. Heaton's there. And he certainly was a leader in civic affairs as well. Trying to think of next where to go. I guess that's during the time I'd like to mention the end of the verses in Matthew and how those were talked about a good deal, because they did try to stress to us as young women in women's school at the time. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. And this, I guess this was an opening somewhat of my eyes. I think maybe like Davidson, I was very sheltered growing up. I don't feel like I was exposed to a lot. I know Linda talked a lot about her background, and I know everyone does not have a pleasant or a good experience, but I can't say that about mine. I feel like I had very much like I think we see Davidson a lot. It's different in a lot of places. And kids sometimes don't realize that until they leave here, that they've grown up in a different place. So I think Queens helped open my eyes a lot. I probably ought to go on and talk a little bit now about our married life. Lynn and I married just as I finished school, and it was a very difficult time in the country. There was a lot going on, civil rights, the Vietnam War, women's rights. All of these issues were very much in the forefront. And I think I need to tell you about our minister in Greensboro. Lynn and I moved to Greensboro as newlyweds and loved it. We were very fond of Greensboro. It's a very different town than some of them that are the age of Greensboro, because it had a lot of national companies there that had headquarters there, and they would put the people in and out all the time. So it wasn't sort of old school like maybe Winston-Salem was, or Charleston or some places like that. And so we made a lot of good friends and enjoyed it. Our minister there was a very, I thought, a very wise man. He felt like we as a church needed to reach out and get to know people other than those in our community, no matter what their race or culture or church or whatever.
What was the church that you and I went to?
It's called St. Paul Presbyterian. The thing that I thought was so unique is he got some resistance about this from other ministers, from Presbyterian. But Greensboro at that time had been kind of a hotbed. Starting at the beginning of the 60s, they kicked off. If any of you've ever been to that museum that they have, the Sit-In Museum, North Carolina A&T is located there. Jesse Jackson came out of that school. And 4 young men sat at the Woolworth's lunch counter and had a sit-in. And this continued on up for about, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 months, something like that. Made quite an impact on Greensboro, both ways, helpful and people that dug their heels in. Well, Jerry decided that the way we needed to get to know each other was to have little, he called them just little discussion groups. And we would meet in our homes. Sometimes we'd meet at the church. And there would be representatives there from the churches in the area, black and white churches. And we did a lot of listening. This is where I wish I had my Stephen ministry training at that time. Because he certainly was great at that. We all did a lot of listening, getting to know each other, hearing each other's points of view. And this helped me a great deal at work. I worked in the Guilford County Health Department. And you see a little bit of everyone in the health department. And I had been hired on a federal program called Child and Youth Project. And we saw a lot of children that were had chronic illnesses. So we saw them frequently. Sickle cell anemia was one we saw a lot, as well as cystic fibrosis, diabetes, chronic things that children had to live with. So we became very fond and got to know these children well. It wasn't like they were just in and out one time. And I really did see a lot of racial issues in the staff, as well as with some of the patients. And I felt like being in this conversation group that I was in at the church made a huge difference in me being able to understand. And as I said, I think some people reacted very negatively to these sit-ins and to the reputation that Greensboro I had at that time. But I really thank him, and I learned a lot at that time from the covenant studies. John, you remember the Mighty Acts of God?
I do.
Where we used that. I love that book. I thought that was an interesting study. And I don't know if any of you have ever studied that over the years. I think it was recycled a little bit for us. It had been out a little while, but.
We actually had that whole collection in the library.
Do you? Oh, I'd like to see it.
We did.
I'd like to see it. Well, I guess I ought to move on, but I did want to talk to you about the importance that I feel like the church has played in helping me to find my way. And some of these studies, as I said, I love the covenant study. I've always been in Presbyterian Women, or it's called Women of the Church then. I'll have to tell you about my mom. Growing up, and even as a small child, my mom was always active in the women's group in our church. And as a real small child, I remember when she'd come home from circle, my brother and I'd say, "What did you bring us?"
Sam.
90.
Had any snacks for me, Mom?
Well, Mom would always either have a little nut cup with some nuts or mints in it or some candy. Sometimes she'd even bring us dessert. I mean, the women went all out. The wonderful food. And my mom, even up toward her 80s, when there were people that were younger than she, was driving all these ladies around to serve. If they needed a ride, if they wanted somebody to pick them up, bring them back home, that was Nani. And she passed along the love of PWB. Some of my friends that I met enjoyed so much, and they quietly formed a little shower for me when I was expecting Amy. And I didn't know anything about this, and I was asked to take someone home, just like my mom. And I did, and when I got back to the house, I thought, well, somebody's having a party in this neighborhood. Oh, it was from ministry.
I love it. That's story. I've never heard that.
I've never heard that. Oh, I have to tell you about her please too. Another memory from this church. It was a young church. It was a church being started by First Presbyterian Church. It was to the south of Greensboro, down toward the Sedgwick area. Didn't even know Greensboro. And I guess he just saw the need. There was a man in the church, I believe he sold insurance. I don't think he was trying to sell insurance at the door of the church, but he did like to be nice. And his name was Herb Reese. Well, Herb Reese welcomed everyone. He remembered everybody's name. He had conversations with everyone. And the children adored him because he carried Reese's candy. I'm thinking that when I'm welcoming and reading today, that this is a continuation of Herb Reese. Joanne, I'm rattling on. Is there anything you want to say at this time?
Janice, pull your mic in a little bit.
Okay, sure. Is that better? Well, after you lived in Greensboro, I guess you and Dad moved to Davidson
No, with Charlotte.
or Charlotte, and then eventually Davidson. And I was born about the same time Mom and Dad moved to Davidson. So I grew up and lived my entire life at 410 Woodland Street in Davidson.
Which is no more.
Yeah, it's no more. But I grew up in DCPC. I was baptized here. I was confirmed here. I did everything here. And much like Mom was saying, it was community then. It was that's what you did. You went to church and you saw your friends and you did activities through the church or through your friends' churches. Davidson was small. And when Mom and Dad moved here, they were some of the, early people that lived here that were not affiliated with Davidson
Why
College.
did you move here? We were asked.
Yeah, I know the McCrees, I grew up with your son, obviously, and most of my friends' parents were college professors. I've told Mom this many times. Some of my Sunday school teachers here were Sam Spencer, Patty King, Doc Taylor, Ben Klein. Little did I know I was going to college every time I went to Sunday school. But I was, and they became my mentors. I didn't know who their importance in the world, but to me, they were important right here. And that really shaped me. I look back now and see how much it shaped me, but the other part of growing up here that was huge was music. And Ms. Kane, I think, touched everyone's lives. Like I said, I can still sing the books of the Bible. Ms. Kane played it at my wedding. I just have such fond memories of being here and having music be part of my, worship. The other thing that I must say is that when you grow up with Dr. Charlie Renow as your minister, you hear the word theology. I mean, I can remember I had this dictionary that our next door neighbors gave me, and I would look up the word theology because I heard Dr. Renow say it so many times. I'm like, I got to know what this theology thing is. And when we were being confirmed, one of the things we had to do was listen to the sermon and take notes. That is very daunting to do with Dr. Renow preaching, but the more I did it, the more I started to learn and put into practice the Bible and my faith. And I didn't realize it for many years until maybe I went away to college, what I was doing all that time. The theology, the Bible, the learning, the Sunday school, it all kind of just went in a circle, but it's beautiful. It's very fun to me. I love that. The other part about growing up in this church that I like to talk about, and I tell my kids a lot of this, and they're like, yeah, we know. I went to Camp Greer, just the best. Been trying to get my kids to go there for years. They don't want to go, but is it a Presbyterian camp? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Joanna took, I think,
I took every friend ever.
Okay.
They didn't have to be Presbyterian. They went with me every year. I mean, I can still, sing the camp songs, but we sang songs and played and learned faith and did adventures and got dirty. And Camp Greer was just, it kind of went hand in hand with what I was learning here. The biggest part of my time here at DCPC growing up was youth group. Back in those days, youth group was run by the minister and his wife. So that was Mr. and Ms. Renow. And then Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, Charlie and Alice Caldwell, the brave souls that took us all over the United States. I know Jason went on many with me. We went on youth group trips, and these trips were to help us learn how to serve, to see the world, to get along with one another, to kind of get away from how we do things with our parents and learn how to be a decision maker. I didn't realize this at the time, but it was. And we went to some fantastic places, but I have to say first, before we could get to any of these fantastic places, we had to earn some money. So at those times, I guess somehow Dr. Renow and the Caldwells would ask people if they needed any services done at their house. And the youth group people would come out and earn money for our trip. Oftentimes we would get people that actually wanted us to do work. I came home one time, I'll never forget, it was me and Wes Naiman. And I came home and I said, we had to really clean some windows. I mean, we had to scrub. I told Mom and Dad, we had to clean windows. We were on ladders. We didn't get a snack. It was awful. Mom's like the working part of it, like to earn the money. And I was like, well, yeah, but we really had to do it. And then the next week that I went out, I went to my next door neighbor's house, Ms. Shank, and she had a huge backyard, tons of leaves. She's like, I want y'all, and it was me and my friend Ken Couch, and she's like, I want y'all to rake the entire backyard. And Ken and I looked at each other, we're like, okay, about 20 minutes in, we're raking. She's like, snack time. The rest of the time, we didn't pick a rake back up. The rest of the time, we sat in Ms. Shank's kitchen. She gave us those Coke bottles, glass Coke bottle, snacks, and it was as much about sitting and talking to her. She wanted to hear what we were doing, what we thought about our trip, what we were excited about, and she wanted to tell us some things too, things that were important in her life. And I'm sure that it was lost on me at that time, but it formed me later. Just connecting, being with each other, hearing each other's stories. And that's a big part of DCPC now. Beautiful. But so the trips we went on, our first trip we went when I was a junior high school student was we went to Colorado, and probably the biggest nerve-wracking thing, I mean, we didn't care about being away from mom and dad, was how far we would get before the church bus broke down. And I mean, I don't know. I think that Mr. Caldwell and Dr. Renow had like some sort of mechanics degrees, because they could they could get a part to work, but we made it to Kansas. And I can remember sitting in a corner, like on the edge of it was like an old service station. It wasn't still running, but just a broken down service station, cornfields around us in Kansas, just sitting there. Like, gosh, wonder what how we're gonna get to Colorado. But we ended up getting there, and
You see the mountains off.
we could see mountains off in the distance, but we did a lot of hiking. We slept outside, which is, a rite of passage as a teenager. You had to do that. We did stay in a hotel, equally fun, and we did some service work. But those trips help kind of form the connections you have with the people that you go to church with. One year we went to Nova Scotia. We made it to Virginia before the church bus broke down. That was a long trip. And the third trip was probably the most meaningful for me. We went a little bit closer. We went to Drift, Kentucky. And I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. I came home and told mom and dad that the people there had nothing, had very little. When you grow up in Davidson and you have all that you could ever want and more, that changed me. Had a hair tie around my wrist. We were painting a house, and the little girl, I mean, she was probably a first grader. I mean, it was like a brown hair tie with gold threads through it. She's like, that is so beautiful. I was like, here. I mean, they just wanted us to be around them. They wanted us to play soccer with them in the backyard. They wanted to help us paint. They just wanted to be with us. And we were just painting their house, and all of those things, that service component to everything that we did when I grew up changed me.
Showed you a different world too.
Yeah, it did. Eventually, when I was in high school, well, Dr. Renow, they had moved on, and the Caldwells, had decided that they had enough challenge in their lives, and we were to get new youth group leaders. And we had a couple that made it 1 week with us. I mean, we put them through the ringer pretty good. We were a rowdy bunch, and the boys were certainly more rowdy than the girls, but they made it 1 week, and we thought, no, it's not going to work. We knew it. We knew after that meeting. We said as we were walking out, we're like, they're so gone. They're not going to make it another week. The next people that took over were the Lyleses, and we had I'll never forget. They were pretty new in the process, and they didn't take junk from us. They were good. We knew they were good. And
They also brought John.
they brought John Stedman, and he used to. I'm sorry for telling this story on you, John Stedman. Don't really even know you. Sorry, but he would wear cowboy boots, like in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, cowboy boots. And we had this presenter. And it was a pretty serious topic. And John Stedman was learning how to turn the light switch on and off. And he walked over to the chair, and we could see it happening. And we're like, this is going to be good. Like this to my friends. And he, right in the middle of the presentation, turned the lights off and turned it back on, turned them off. And, and then it was just, and we're like, these are our leaders. These are our next leaders. We like their kids. We like them. So that was a lot of fun. For her, I think I graduated by that time.
But on your birthday.
One of the things that I really loved about growing up in this church is it taught me how to be a leader. Well, mom and dad held just about every position known in the church. I mean, dad was the treasurer. I knew how to count money out of the offering plate. I mean, he was the superintendent for something one year. I mean, basically hung out with you in Carol Barber's office all the time. I mean, made copies, all kinds of stuff, but it taught you how to be a leader because in that time you learned how to work in the church. You learned how to help the church run. And another person that was really instrumental in that for me was Larry Kane. He asked me to help him run the sound system. And back in those days, it was just you turn the mics on and off. And, you know, as a teenager, especially later in close to graduation, you had to be awake. You had to listen when the minister was getting up there and do the microphone. So I had to pay attention, but he showed me how to do it. And he put a lot of faith in me. I think part of it was because he was tired of doing it every week, but that was okay because it taught me how to do those things and important things to know in a church. And the last thing I want to touch on before I left for college was that I was asked to be the youth representative on our very first associate pastor nominating committee. And it was when we brought on Tom Ryan.
Wow.
No, Tom Blair. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Tom Blair. And that went on, the search for him went on. I had left for college by that time, but I got to see him preach. I went to Elon and he came down to Sanford, I believe it was, and I got to go see him preach. And that meant a lot to me to be part of that committee and to learn how the process went. Mom and Dad had a lot of experience with that, and I'd heard a lot about it, but that kind of brought you into figuring out, you know, how your church ran and how you could help with that. I really enjoyed that a lot at that time. The biggest part for me in my faith journey, moving into college, was figuring out how I could leave my home church and be part of another church. That's pretty daunting when you're a college student. Elon at the time was a lot of people from Maryland, a lot of people from New York, and many of those of my friends were Catholics. And they went to Catholic services, and I tried Catholic services and enjoyed them. I found them to be procedural and ritual based, which I enjoyed. I felt like I had a good connection with that here, but I ultimately was a Presbyterian. I knew that. And, you know, spent lots of times back and forth here at DCPC. After I graduated from college, I lived here for a while. I lived in Raleigh for a while, and always kind of came back to being at DCPC. I think when you're in your 20s, I noticed myself falling into a pattern of negotiating with God a little bit. If I do this, can I achieve this? I don't know if it was part of being wanting to be an achiever. If I do the things that I know I need to do, that you want me to do, can I achieve this? Can I have a better career? Can I have a great relationship? Can I have a better salary? All those things you're kind of striving for in your early 20s. And I felt myself getting into that pattern of negotiating with God. And I knew that the best way for me to get out of that was to go back to going to church. And because I wasn't very active in any church at that time in Raleigh, and to go back to the basis of my faith, which was Bible study and learning and knowing that God had a plan for me. And I think when I started to let those expectations go, the expectations I had of myself, the expectations I had of God, that things started falling into place. Just as he was leading me the whole time, it took those missteps to realize what I needed to do, let go a little bit. My dad always said, her ring, the 11th commandment, thou shalt not sweat it. Stop sweating it so much and just live it. So that kind of brings me to where I am now, which is gosh, I told Mom, I said, sometimes I feel like a snob. Sometimes I feel like I'm just basic, but I don't question my faith. I don't know if it was something I was born with, grew up with, have in me. It's very, very strong. I think I have struggled some with finding my place here at DCPC. When my husband and I were married, we came to church here. And, you know, coming back to your home church doesn't always feel quite right. You know, things have changed from when you're a youth. And we have certainly done our fair share of visiting other churches, going different places, but none of those felt right either. But I think coming back here from time to time helps me kind of just plant my feet. And there was a time when we weren't very active in the church. We had some, my husband, when he grew up, he was not involved in church. And when he came to DCPC, he was baptized here. And I am forgetting the name. I'm forgetting the name of the minister who baptized Lee. Alan Brindisi. Yeah, he and Lee were very close. And I think that when Alan passed away, it was hard on my husband, and I felt like we had kind of had a disconnect with the church at that time. I had not been as active, and I got a call one day from Al Sutton. And I grew up with the Sutton's son, and Al called and said, would you be interested in being on the associate pastor nominating committee for who is now Robert and Andrew? And that was pivotal for me. I'm so grateful for that. I said, well, my first child, Ben, my oldest son, Ben, who's now almost 17, he was a little guy. He was about to start kindergarten, and I said, gosh, Mr. Sutton, I have not been that active in the church. You know, I love the church. I mean, it's just in me. It's my home church. And he said, that's exactly what I think would be great. And that just really flipped the switch. That changed everything. Being on that committee just helped me kind of get connected with the church again, and helped me get back in that process of loving to be around people who challenged me and who I didn't know, and, you know, taught me new ideas and new things. And the process of picking people that could be great for our church was really rewarding. Robert Alexander was one of those people. I'll never forget, we went down to Robert's church, and Carson and I were, you know, sent to go, and we didn't want to look like a couple, but we probably looked like a couple, but we were trying to act like we weren't a couple. And we looked like two big sore thumbs in that church. I mean, we looked like we looked like exactly why we were there. But anyway, we went and we loved it. And when we were working on the committee, we were assigned to the different ministers. Since I had a young family, I was on the committee that focused on the young family minister, which was going to be Robert. And we had brought several names forward, and my dad actually knew of a minister in Charlotte that would have been great for this role, and I really liked him a lot. And they said, well, I said, I think then I should be the person that goes and sees Robert, because, you know, I don't know a lot about him. And I was won over right then and there. And that was a huge part of kind of helping me re-engage with my faith and continuing to be involved here. And I think, you know, sometimes I have some guilt and some uneasiness. I'm not as active as I would like to be, but that does not change my faith in any way.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
So, probably everybody in the room and online knows that the new welcoming center that's going to be built is gonna be named after Lynn and Marjorie. Could you talk a little bit, Marjorie, about kind of this ministry of welcoming and hospitality? So many people, when they've come into the church, first encountered you and Lynn. That was the same with me when I first showed up here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can mention several things. I told you about her roots. The other thing is, when Lynn and I moved back to Charlotte, transferred back to Charlotte, he was the predecessor of Bank of America. There was a fairly large church in our neighborhood. I say large, probably medium is a better definition, but it was sort of like a community church. A lot of people that had grown up in that church. We had little Amy. No one spoke to us, not even the minister. And we kind of hung around. We can go back. And that's something that spoke to me. And after we arrived here and I was asked to be a member, if I would be on the membership committee, which I have enjoyed off and on all these years, 40 some years. And then we became a little more intentional about reading. We had readers along, but we became, it's about the time Julie Hill was here, if y'all remember Julie. We formed a committee. We decided that we would have a procedure that we'd have a little class. Y'all seen us talk about that on the video. And it was such a joy for us. We enjoyed it so much. We got to meet new people that came into the church and into the community. And we remembered being asked, why did you move to Davidson? Your husband works in Charlotte and you're not with the college, and you know, so it was a way for us to feel like that we could welcome people that were college related people that were here. And we used to have in the fall, I know Susan remembers this, when we have a fall picnic and all those new people would be introduced that had come in over the summer. And then the McConnell and the Pines at Davidson was really growing. We were seeing a big change. And so readers were definitely needed. And it was important to us, John, because we knew what it was like to not be welcomed. And we enjoyed it. To us, it was a joy. It wasn't a job. It was a joy to be at the door, to greet people and get to know them. And there are people that I know that way that I would not have known otherwise. I maybe would not have crossed paths with them over the years, unless you were at the same service with us having different services, unless you're in a class with them. And that's something I haven't said a lot about, is how much I have enjoyed all the faith formation activities this church provides are just phenomenal. And the people you're with and how the people you're with shape you and strengthen you is just so important to me. We were bowled over, our whole family, John, was just bowled over by this.
It was emotional for me.
It was hard.
Because, yeah, I think I saw all the time and just love you have for the church. Brought with that, it was really, really meaningful. When I was making some notes about what I wanted to talk about, I thought, gosh, some of the moments I've had here at DCPC have been full circle moments in my faith journey. And I wrote out a note card about some of those points. And then I started thinking about the Opening Doors campaign. And I noticed that most of the words that are on the Opening Doors campaign are the words that I wrote that have always been here. I mean, I'm sorry that DCPC didn't ask me to write the Opening Doors thing. It saved a lot of money. But it's true. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's still the same wonderful things I grew up with: welcoming, connecting, serving. That's a lot of what I, even as a mom now, if I'm always connecting with someone, whether I want to or not, a teacher, a principal, a parent. I'm serving my family in certain ways during this season of my life. But it's true that campaign and that special place is just really meaningful for us. Yeah.
Any closing? It's time for us to.
I know it's time, and I have really neglected talking about our church, and you know how special it is and how many wonderful opportunities we have here and the people that we have to worship with. I just want to say how meaningful this church has been to us, particularly after we lost Lynn, and the love and the appreciation I have for people in this church that have reached out to us. And I'll have to tell you about my buddies, Ben Mitchell and Beth Christenberry, who have both lost their husbands, approached me, and we all became the three amigos. We got together and talked about what could we do. And that's how the healing support group was formed. And that has been very meaningful to me, that people could support each other. And I have really felt that since COVID, because the church did so much for us. People sent cards, calls, food,
Goodbye.
visiting. It was,
Spent time.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was just phenomenal. And then COVID came along, and I feel so for those people that haven't had the presence that we have, people in their lives being able to give them a hug or talk to them about their loved one. And I brought with me a book that we use sometimes in healing support, because I love this quote. I heal in part by allowing others to express their love for me. By choosing to invite others into my journey, I move toward healing and health. If I hide from others, I hide from healing. And this is part of our mantra that we use in that group, is we do try to reach out to each other and let people know that we're there. We don't have to explain to each other why we're there. We all know. So
What's the book for you?
this is Understanding Your Grief. This is my book on hospice. I went through the hospice counseling that they give, and I highly recommend it. But I do just want to say thank you to all of you. And I want to close with the words that I used in the stewardship presentation last fall. This is my little hymn that I learned when I was sitting with this God around that little round table in the priesthood at Mulberry Church. Praise him, all you little children. God is love, God is love. Thank him, thank him. Serve him, serve him. Love him, love him. God is love, God is love.
Amen. Give you a closing prayer. Good gracious God, we give you thanks for this day, for these stories of welcoming and openness and serving. Help us to know your love and in turn share that love with us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.